Whilst we thought nothing of exporting our beer halfway around the world for our thirsty troops,
our government did need to take action to ensure we bought the goods that were being exported back to us. Our resident guru of historic gastronomy, Ivan Day, is, as usual, more than well equipped to tell us why.
Despite the fact that we had this enormous empire with various countries producing all sorts of wonderful commodities, food products, we as customers in Britain were not very good at buying our own empire goods. So what happened was that in the mid-1920s, this board was formed called the Empire Marketing Board, which was really set up just to encourage people to buy empire goods.
And when some PR whiz decided the best way of doing that would be to dream up a dish incorporating ingredients from all over the world,
Christmas pudding seemed a natural choice to fire up the public's enthusiasm for empire produce and bind our crumbling empire back together.
I don't think there's a single dish in the history of British food that has had so much symbolism thrust upon it. You've got the symbolism of the unity of empire, you've got trade, you've got education. It's an extraordinary phenomenon, and of course now it seems completely and utterly bizarre, but in those days it made a lot of sense. So I'm going to have a go at making the 1927 empire pudding, which was formulated by the King chef, Monsieur Cédar.
So, are we all sat comfortably for our home economics cum geography lesson rolled into one?
Yes, sir.
We'll begin then.
The first place in the world we're going to go to is England. Pudding is an English invention, and it was usually made with leftover stale bread. The other essential ingredient, of course, is flour. By the 1920s, we were actually importing a lot of wheat from Canada as well. So this could be British or it could be Canadian. The third foundation ingredient is suet, which is the fat that surrounds the kidneys of animals. In this case, it's beef suet. Now, when the first recipe was published, the New Zealand farmers wanted their name to be put next to it, and they indeed were exporting it to England at the time.
And our fourth ingredient is sugar, Master Myers. Definitely not from New Zealand.
No, Kingy, we've got to make a trip to the Caribbean for that. Where next, Ivan?
Well, we're going to have to cross the Atlantic again and go to South Africa, where we were growing these wonderful raisins, but also citrons, lemons and oranges. And then from South Africa, we got to head south and far east. We're going to Australia, where they grew currants and sultanas. In fact, it was the Australians, really, whose complaints about how poor the British were at buying their goods, who really kicked this whole thing off about the empire pudding. And they were very, very keen on the idea.
Yep, the whining Aussies were really keen on empire pudding. But the truth is, even now, we still get some of our dried fruits from California. Anyway, next up, spices.
Our first port of call is Sri Lanka, which in those days was called Ceylon, and to India to get cinnamon and something which was called pudding spice, which was a purpose-made mixed spice that was exported from India into England. We then have got to go across the Indian Ocean to Zanzibar to get some clothes. And then, believe it or not, we've got to go around the Cape and back across the Atlantic to the West Indies to get some nutmeg.
So far, so good. Now back to Britain for a few apples. But you can't make a pudding without breaking a few eggs.
We're given the option of obtaining these from either England or from, interestingly, the Irish Free State. Now, this really upset the people from Northern Ireland because they felt they weren't actually included in this. But we'll come to an option that they had a little bit later on. We're going to move now on to the alcoholic ingredients. So, let's start off with this one, which is rum. from the West Indies or from British Guyana. This was a very, very important product of empire. But there was also brandy. But this isn't some fancy French cognac. This is brandy made either in Cyprus, in Australia, South Africa, and even Palestine, which was part of the British Empire in the 1920s. So I'm going to go with Palestinian brandy.
With ingredients from all over the empire jostling for position in the bowl, the one addition capable of uniting them all was, of course, beer. British beer from anywhere in Britain.
I'm going to opt for Northern Ireland because they've got missed out so far. So what I've got here is some nice black stout, which will give it a great colour too. So if you like, it really strengthens the fact that Britain has got a hold over the empire. We're the top dog.
Is that the geography lesson over with, sir? I think I've clocked up more food miles than Phileas Fogg on a feasting spree.
Aye, well, I'll never look at Empire pudding in the same way ever again. But stay seated, class. We've one more ingredient you wouldn't want to sink your teeth into.
In the 1926 recipe, it instructs us to take an English threepenny bit for luck and to put it into the pudding. And remarkably, I've got here a silver threepenny bit from 1926, the year of the Empire pudding.
I think I'd give Ivan 10 out of 10 for attention to detail there.
It doesn't stop there. Old-fashioned cooking pot.
Check.
Old-fashioned cooking range.
Check.
An old-fashioned traditionally boiling it for 6 hours rather than chucking it in a microwave.
Check.
Fortunately, Ivan knows when to draw the line.
The earliest puddings were actually boiled in sheep's stomachs. They weren't called Christmas pudding, they were called hackin. But we're going back about 300 or 400 years. And then they started putting them in a cloth, so you tied it up and it was like a big round dumpling, and they come out looking like a cannonball, which everyone remembers because you still get that on the Christmas cards, but we don't make them like that anymore. But at the time that the Empire pudding evolved during the 20s, this was the way in which they were cooked. Okay, that's a good colour. I'm going to put this plate on top and then hopefully do a quick flip over like that. Is it going to come out or is it not? Oh my God. Ah, look. Ah. I've got an Empire pudding. I can't believe it. There it is, brought back to life, Empire pudding. Well, I brought the pudding back to life, but I don't really think I want to bring the British Empire back. I think we've said goodbye to all of that.
Christmas pudding. What could be more British than that?
Well, I can think of one thing.